Georgia may have put a beat down on Clemson last weekend, and Georgia may still be the number one team in the country. But for at least one national college football writer, the Dogs still have a lot of questions to answer when it comes to explosive playmakers. So, is there something to that? Do the Dogs lack the explosive offensive playmakers necessary to win a national title? Well, let's go to the film to find out.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is the Glory UJ podcast, brought to you by our great friends at MyBookie. If you are a diehard Georgia fan looking for content designed for diehard Georgia fans, you've come to the right channel. So make sure to subscribe right now, like this video, comment, let me know what you guys think about today's topic, and of course, check out the Glory UJ podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, wherever, you can find more great Georgia content just like this. But all right, guys, let's talk about the explosive playmaking potential of the Georgia offense, or I guess the potential lack of explosive playmaking potential of the Georgia offense, according to one Ari Wasserman, now of On3, was previously with The Athletic, now working for On3, I think as of this past week and as of Saturday. And here's what Wasserman had to say on his podcast with Andy Staples. Now, I'm going to read this to you guys. I'm not going to play it because I don't want to mess with any copyright infringement laws. Don't want to deal with that, so just bear with me here. Got a couple quotes that Ari Wasserman had about Georgia, and specifically Georgia's lack of playmaking ability. He said, quote, "Georgia is very good. Georgia is one of the top 5 teams in college football, but their lack of explosive playmaking ability scares the out of me. When you look at the team in terms of proven playmaking ability, it's not what it was." He also goes on to say, "I came into the season wondering who are going to be those guys on offense that you really know, like, hey, this person is going to produce every single quarter of every single game. And I don't know that Georgia has that guy this year." Interesting take. Now, here is what I would agree with Wasserman here. Here's what I think he might be onto something. Georgia did lose its top 2 playmakers from the past couple years. Certainly last year, even though they were both banged up for large swaths of last year. But Brock Bowers, first-round draft pick. Ladd McConkey, not a first-round draft pick, but very close to a first-round draft pick. Both those guys are now in the NFL. They'll be playing games on Sundays, not on Saturdays in the red and black anymore. So that's true. That's real. I'm with him there. It is also probably true that Georgia does not have anyone on its roster that is going to produce at the level of Brock Bowers, certainly when it comes to explosive playmaking ability, because, I mean, guys, Brock Bowers is one of one. There's only one of those guys, okay? I'm with him there. I don't really disagree. I think to a lesser degree, the same might be true of Ladd McConkey. He was extraordinarily explosive for Georgia within our offense the past couple of years. I don't think it's quite to the same degree as Brock Bowers, but yes, Ladd was very explosive and productive in the Georgia offense. That's fair. I'm with him there. Now, where Wasserman loses me is when he talks about Georgia's, quote, lack of explosive playmaking ability. Because to me, guys, that's just factually inaccurate. And look, I get that Wasserman is a national guy, and he, as a result, doesn't follow Georgia as closely as I do, as you guys do. But come on, man. I'm not asking you to be like the foremost expert on the Georgia Bulldogs football roster, but saying that Georgia lacks playmaking ability, that just portrays sheer ignorance of the Georgia roster. And if you are a national college football writer, you need to have a pretty good understanding of the roster of the number 1 team in the country. It kind of just goes with the territory, right? Kind of goes with the job. And look, I'm not calling Ari Wasserman a dumb guy. I actually think Ari Wasserman is a smart guy. I think that he does a really good job with his podcast and in his writing, previously at the Athletic, now with On3. This isn't me calling this a dumb take. I don't want to use that word dumb. I'm calling it an ignorant take, and I mean that in the truest sense of the term. I'm not trying to take a shot at him. Like, in the truest sense of the term ignorant, I just think it's an ignorant take because I don't think he really truly understands the skill talent on the Georgia roster. And if you think about it, guys, just because you, Ari Wasserman, don't know who those guys are because you don't follow Georgia's roster closely enough. And look, you're national guys, so there's a lot of teams out there you have to follow. I get it. But just because you don't know who those guys are, because you don't follow the team as closely as some other people out there, doesn't mean that those players don't exist. It doesn't mean they aren't still on Georgia's roster. Now, again, I would agree with him that Georgia probably doesn't have one single guy that's going to produce the explosive plays at the rate of a Brock Bowers or maybe even a Ladd McConkey. But here's what I would say. I do think this year Georgia has a greater quantity of skill players that are capable of producing explosive plays that are ready to actually play for Georgia this year. So who are those guys? Let's go there and let's back it up with tape. And I want to start at wide receiver. And the guy I actually want to start with is a guy that hasn't really made a ton of plays throughout his career, now in his fifth year at Georgia, but has shown the ability to be an absolute explosive threat every time he steps on the field. And that, of course, is Arian Smith. Now, it is true, this guy has struggled to consistently produce throughout his career, largely due to injuries and just getting set back when it comes to his development. But one thing that Arian Smith has done, really every single time he's gotten opportunities, is create explosive plays. In fact, I would say that's about all that Arian Smith has done. Coming into this season, guys, Arian Smith had 20 career receptions through 4 years. But here's the thing. Those 20 receptions went for an average of 27 yards per catch. Half of those 20 receptions were 31 or more yards. 5 of the 20 were for 51 or more yards. So you're going to sit here and tell me that Arian Smith is not an explosive playmaker on the Georgia roster? Has he done it a ton? No, that's fair. Again, only 20 catches coming to this year. I think he had 6 catches, almost a third of his career catches in one game against Clemson. But in his first 4 years on campus at Georgia, he made explosive play after explosive play when given opportunities. And some of those were massive plays. You saw it there with the couple in the Ohio State game, one in the SEC championship game against Alabama, what set up a score in the second half. So Arian Smith might not be a proven name when it comes to like the national scale, which again, Ari Wasserman's a national rider, but we Georgia fans know what type of speed Arian Smith has and the type of explosive playmaking ability he has. He's a 10-100 meter guy. 10-1, guys. He used to run track at the SEC level for Georgia and was really good. He was on the 4x1 relay team with Matthew Bowling. All right? This guy is a legit track speed type guy. And now that he has really fully developed more so as a receiver, now that he hasn't been dealing with the injuries, I think this guy is going to be a big-time explosive playmaker, a consistent explosive playmaker for Georgia this year, and I think he's already started to show that last week. Next up, Dominic Lovett. Let's go talk about Dominic Lovett. Dominic Lovett, yes, was in a support role last year, but when he got opportunities, especially late in the year when Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers were out with injuries, who became the featured guy in the Georgia passing game? Yeah, it was Dominic Lovett. He produced when he was asked to be that guy. You go back to Missouri in 2022, he was Missouri's leading receiver in 2022. He was a slot fade nightmare. And Dominic Lovett is still very much that guy. He just didn't get as many opportunities to show it last year. But again, that doesn't mean he can't do it. He's proven it. He's proven it in the SEC. Led Missouri receiving in 2022 in explosive play after explosive play for the Tigers in that season. What about London Humphreys? All right, I know that's a newer guy, right? And I guess maybe we shouldn't expect Ari Wasserman, a national guy, to understand who London Humphrey is. Sure, London Humphreys is a lowly Vandy transfer, but his speed and explosive playmaking ability is what got him an offer from Georgia in the first place. Despite what Roddy White may think, the guy can absolutely fly. And he put that on full display in week 1 with a 40-yard catch and run touchdown. And Dillon Bell is another player on the Georgia roster at receiver now that has made explosive plays at Georgia, both at receiver and at running back. He was just going back and forth last year, and he might not have been a featured guy in the Georgia offense last year, but we Georgia fans, if you actually pay attention to the team and the roster, you know the type of explosive playmaking ability that Dillon Bell has. Just because national guys don't know it, again, doesn't mean that he can't do it. Now, speaking of running back, which is a position that Dillon Bell has also played at times throughout his career, if you want to compare the explosive playmaking ability of the 2024 Georgia offense to its immediate predecessors, running back is a position where Georgia has significantly upgraded its playmaking potential. We still have yet to see him in a Georgia uniform, but Trevor Etienne is a proven explosive playmaker in the SEC. At Florida, and you're seeing it right now, he would routinely bite off chunks of yards in both the run and the pass game. And like London Humphreys, that's exactly why Georgia went out and got him. And y'all don't need me to tell you about Nate Frazier. Everyone now, after week 1, knows about Nate Frazier. I've been telling you guys about him for over a month, but now we all know. Everyone knows. And Ari Wasserman, national guy, I get it, but did you watch the Georgia-Clemson game? Did you not see what Nate Frazier was doing? Is that not enough explosive playmaking ability for you? But Nate Frazier, week 1 against Clemson, announced himself in a big way in his first ever collegiate game, and I believe he will be Georgia's most explosive back since DeAndre Swift. And again, he's already, one game into his college career, already started to prove that. And I think if you give him the ball, if Ari Wasserman wants to talk about, like, does Georgia have any guys that can produce every single quarter of every single game? If you give Nate Frazier the football, he is going to be a guy that will produce explosive plays every single quarter of every single game. He will have that type of potential. And again, guys, this is not a personal attack on Ari Wasserman. That's not my intent here. I do think that Ari Wasserman is very good at his job, and he has plenty of good takes, plenty of takes that I do agree with. This is just me right now objecting to one of those takes, because I happen to believe that that particular take of his that he had on Saturday in his reaction episode is wildly misguided and wildly inaccurate. You saw it there with the film. And look, guys, I am not. If you know me, you know this. If you're new to the podcast, just finding this channel for the first time, if you go back and listen to enough of what we put out there over the past 10 years, you would know that I'm not one of these guys that feels like Georgia has to be the best at everything. Do I want us to be the best at everything? Of course I do. But do I have to sit here and say, well, Georgia's the best at this, Georgia's the best at that? And take offense when somebody says, well, Georgia might not be the best at this particular aspect of the game. No, that's not who I am, right? If you think that, you would be wrong. I mean, guys, I spent the entire offseason, and really going back to last season as well, like middle of last season through the entire offseason, telling everyone who would listen that our defensive line play and our rush defense last year simply wasn't good enough. It wasn't what it needed to be. I've spent years lamenting the lack of a natural pass rush for the Georgia defense. I've even lamented our lack of explosiveness in recent years from the running back position. I understand, guys, that Georgia is not perfect. We're really, really good. We're as good, if not better, than anyone out there, but that doesn't mean that we are perfect, and there are areas where I do think it is fair to critique the Dogs, and I just mentioned some of those. I just think that this is not one of those. I just happen to think that explosive playmakers on offense is not one of those areas that Georgia should be critiqued on. I think Georgia has plenty of them. In fact, if you look at I know it's 1 week, we're 1 week into the season, so it's certainly a limited sample size, but we're talking about this year. That's what Ari Wasserman is talking about. In fact, Georgia played a top 10, I think a top 10 caliber Clemson defense. It won't say they're top 10 right now because they just played Georgia, but by the end of the year, I think this Clemson defense will once again be right around the top 10 when it comes to total defense in most major defensive statistical categories. But despite the fact that Georgia played a very, very good Clemson defense, right now through 1 week, Georgia is still top 5 in the SEC in both plays of 20 plus yards, 30 plus yards, and oh, by the way, also plays of 40 or more yards. Right now, Georgia is still top 15 nationally in plays of 20 or more yards, again, despite the fact that Georgia played one of the best defenses in the entire country in the only game that we have played to date. In fact, Georgia has more 40 plus or more yard plays so far this season through one game than, Ohio State, Oregon, Missouri, Miami, Oklahoma in the exact same number as Tennessee. So if you're worried about Georgia's explosive playmaking ability or lack thereof, why are we not also worried about those teams if Georgia has produced more explosive plays than those teams and did that while playing a much better defense than any of those teams played in week 1? So if you ask me, I'm just one guy, but if you ask me, even without Brock Bowers, even without Ladd McConkey, Georgia has plenty of explosive playmaking potential on offense in 2024. And just give it a couple weeks and you'll see that on full display. But all right, guys, thank you for being here with me today. I appreciate it. If you enjoy this content, if you're a diehard Georgia fan looking for more content designed for diehard Georgia fans, make sure to subscribe to this channel right now. Like the video, comment, let me know what you guys think. Love to hear from you. But thanks for being here. I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.